Hi, my name is Jessica Allerton, Deputy Editor of the Pathologist, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Lotte Mulder and Kamran Mirza. Before we begin, could you both please briefly introduce yourselves?
Yes, hi Jess. So excited to be here with you today. I'm Lotte Mulder. I've worked for the ACP for the last 10 years, creating their leadership education and patient advocacy programming. And then I'm also the founder of two little companies. One is the Mulder Method, and then of course Mia the Marvelous.
Hi, Jess. My name is Kamran Mirza. I'm a professor of pathology at Michigan Medicine. A hematopathologist is my day job. I'm also an educator, which goes hand in hand. I've been trying to really, through reaching out to trainees, I guess I'm someone who spent a career trying to open doors for learners and really demystifying laboratory medicine. And I'm also a dad and now the co-author of Mia the Marvelous. Very excited to be here.
Thank you both. So, Lotte, can you tell us where the idea for Mia the Marvelous Lab Explorer came from? Is she based on or inspired by a real person?
Yeah, so as I stated, I have worked as a patient advocate, really focusing on teaching patients about laboratory testing and just the importance of um, diagnostic medicine and even how they can speak to their pathologist when they're diagnosed with something serious. And through that, I also have learned how complicated it can be to explain certain diagnoses, especially, of course, to a younger audience. But it is really important for children to understand what is going in their bodies, especially if they are really ill. And so I really wanted to write a children's book about a young scientist who help children explain in a really fun but also an educational way what is happening, especially when they have something serious such as leukemia. And then Kamran and I have, gosh, we've worked together for years. We've done research together, we've published together, we've done courses together. And so I was looking for a co-author who was both, of course, a specialist in pathology and laboratory medicine, but also who was incredibly passionate about education. And I'll be honest with you, Kamran was the only choice. There was nobody else that I even considered. And so it was really with him and the incredible collaboration that we had that Mia came to life. And in terms of who she's inspired by, I think her in and of itself, she's not inspired by one particular person, but she really consists of all the magical pathologists and laboratory professionals who are doing incredible work. There really are medical detectives on very many levels. And so, a lot of things that are happening in the lab is really magical. And I think especially to an untrained eye. And then I think, and Kamran, can speak to this, of course, but on a more personal level, Mia is definitely inspired by all our daughters. Um, all four of them are they're compassionate, they're kind, they're inspiring, they're incredibly engaged, young and younger women. And so it's a little bit of a combination of all of that, I would say. Kamran.
Yeah, I mean, I echo the fact that Lotte is probably literally the only one I would have wanted to write this book with for reasons that she mentioned. And we're so excited that this is out there. To answer your question, I think that she's inspired by, not really one person, but an amalgamation of like the countless children and kind of families that who might be sitting in waiting rooms, and wondering, what's happening to their blood or their biopsies. My youngest has a health condition that needed a lot of blood tests when she was younger. And, through her eyes being a laboratorian and a pathologist, I could kind of understand that there's questions about the fact that this blood tube is being whisked away. And so it might have been a little bit of inspiration from that. It could have been the fact that as a hematopathology fellow, a patient who had recovered successfully from leukemia came down to the laboratories and we walked him through his samples and we showed him his normal blood and then we showed him the leukemic blood and then we showed them the normal blood after he was better. So I think that in that sense, Mia really is a blend of all of those brave children that are probably sitting in clinics and, young learners that sometimes come to visit our laboratories. And and they're asking, how is this working? I think that there's so many superheroes we hear about as children. Like, I wanted to be a firefighter, or, you want to be there are all of these elaborate superheroes. And I think another superhero we don't talk about that much is is the person in the laboratory, right? Whether that be the pathologist or the laboratorian. And so in any case, and I completely agree with Lotte, between the two of us, we have 4 daughters, and we'd be lying if there wasn't a little bit of inspiration coming from there as well.
I love that. It's always nice to draw the inspiration from those closest to you. So Lotte, can you tell us a little bit about the book's plot and how much pathology is rooted within that narrative?
Yeah, I would say pathology is the plot. So for those of you who've not read it, Mia is our young superhero lab explorer, and she has a talking microscope named Micah. And then she gets a call on her super buzzer, as one does, from the hospital, because they have a little boy in the hospital who is not feeling well, and they need Mia's help to figure out what is wrong. Then she uses a little bit of magical shrinking powder and dives into Leo's blood sample. Leo's the boy in the hospital that is sick. And then there she sees that there are too many white blood cells who are also not doing their job very well. And so the red blood cells cannot deliver the oxygen to where it needs to be delivered. And this is why Leo is feeling so well. And then Mia determines that he has acute leukemia. Then she uses her anti-shrinking powder and goes back to her regular size, and then discusses those findings with the pathologist of the hospital, who then confirms the diagnosis. And then Mia and Micah also go to the hospital and explain it to Leo about what is happening, and that pathologists and the lab professionals at the hospitals will continue to monitor him to ensure that his treatment is working and it's working well. So pathology is threaded throughout the entire plot. The goal is really to not only, I'd say it's a dual goal. It's one, to have children understand that they're not alone, that if they're going through something as serious as leukemia, right, that they're seeing themselves represented in this story and understanding what is happening in Leo's body and therefore also their own. But then also understanding a little bit about the importance of pathology and laboratory medicine and what those people do and how important it is, because there's a lot happening in a body that you can't see, and that there's a whole team of people dedicated to that.
Yeah, I think that, like Lotte was mentioning, pathology is woven really into every layer of the book. But I think we're proud that we've done it in kind of a gentle and inviting way. I think that, hopefully by the end, children can learn that the lab is not really a mysterious place. It's a world filled with helpers who are behind the scenes. And I think that the themes of partnership, which could be Mia's partnership with Micah, themes of the behind the scenes superheroes, which could be pathology and laboratory medicine or any other behind the scenes superhero, they're all there. I think that and then the theme of kindness about kind of what happens with Leo, how his school responds to it, and we encourage the reader to think about all of these in forms of questions that we've interspersed throughout the book. So I think that definitely the science is there. We've touched upon the science, but I'm hoping that we've wrapped it like in adventure and in friendship and partnership and discovery, kind of as sub-themes.
That's wonderful. So is there a specific target audience range? And are there any techniques that you've used to maybe simplify that science, Kamran?
Yeah, so I think that, Lotte and I discussed it. I think that in general, the book is marketed for kids 5 to 9. I would say you could probably stretch that and make it 5 to 12. It is more text than, you'd find in like an infant book. It's not a book which just has 2 words per page, because we did want to clarify a story. And, you know, the science has been simplified because of the storytelling and the character-driven explanations and the illustrations. But I would say that there's a broadish range. Yesterday, you know, I got a text from a friend who read it to a child that was younger than 5. And, you know, we know that there are people who have been like 11 and 12 and they've been reading it as well. And so we've avoided really technical jargon and have really tried to bring up concepts of the science through dialogue between Mia and Micah and the pathologist. And I think that then there's also like an emphasis on empowerment. And so the younger we can start off with them, I think the better it is that they understand what the pathologist does.
That's fantastic. So is there a particular reason why you wrote for that younger audience rather than, say, teenagers or students?
You know, if I was to take a stab at that question, I'm not sure if it was very intentional, but it wasn't without thought. I think the teenagers, when they're discovering science, they're doing it through textbooks that are full of rules, and they're thinking about grades. And as a person who's always been thinking about the pathways to pathology and laboratory medicine careers, I've been struck by the fact that, you know, often by the time kids are in college, we've already lost them because, you know, they've lost them by, and what I mean by that is that they're already thinking about a particular pathway of what to differentiate as. So I think it was natural for me at least to think about the younger learner and really introduce them to something that they may not be exposed to, probably even ever. Like patients are going to the hospital all the time from like, you know, being babies all the way to old people, and like they don't know what the laboratory does. And so I think that in that sense, younger children are very curious. They're natural scientists, and that, you know, their questions are fearless and bold. And, you know, they're not shy to touch things, to test ideas, to break and rebuild and imagine things. And I think that that's really a space we thought that Mia and her story would thrive.
That's amazing.
You know, I think for, again, like something so serious as leukemia, right? It's not, it can feel very challenging to explain that to a younger audience, especially if you're involved in someone's life as their parent or their friend or their family member or classmate. And so having an avenue not only opens that understanding, but also through those discussion questions that Kamran mentioned, that you can even do with classmates or with the whole, you know, with family, to really help kids understand what is happening to someone else or themselves. And then, of course, not, you know, what better way than to explain that and to foster that the love of science through, you know, this laboratory superhero with her talking microscope.
Absolutely. I love that. Lotte, could you tell us a bit about what the 100-day challenge is for Mission Marvelous, and what influenced that decision?
Yeah, so we really created this book because of a passion to help children, and to foster that love of science from an early age. And so, you know, this was, to be quite frank, this was never thought of as like, oh, we're going to make money off of this. This was pure passion, desire to help and serve others. And then so when we launched the book, both Carmen and I actually purchased a lot of copies and started donating them ourselves to libraries, to schools, clinics. And then we received some messages from other people who had purchased the book and had donated themselves as well. And so that really made us think about making this a little bit of a movement where kids are getting the books that they need or the book that they need, while then also providing an avenue for those who can and want to help, to make that happen. And then Kamran actually was the one that found that we had launched right before we launched the book, like 105 days before International Child Cancer Awareness Day. And then so that just felt like a perfect moment to launch our Mission Marvelous, and to see if we can get, our goal is to get at least 1,000 books in at least 100 places, maybe more. And yeah, it's been incredibly exciting to see the reaction of people and their willingness to help and support. And yeah, it's been wonderful.
That's wonderful to hear, and I hope that you do reach and even exceed that goal. Kamran, would you mind speaking on the gaps in science teaching in schools, and do you think there's any particular way that that could be improved on?
So I think that the narrative through Mia isn't necessarily because there are gaps in science teaching in schools. I think that science teaching in schools is pretty great, depending on which school you go to. I think that what's different about Mia is that usually children are learning science as facts and not a story. We've heard through different types of educators and even trainees that the things that resonate the most with them, even about science, is when you kind of put it into a story form, right? And we can all imagine a science teacher standing, when we were younger and really developing a story out of the science. And so there, of course, you have to memorize the parts of a cell, right? But you don't necessarily always hear the journey of what happens in a cell, right? You learn the vocabulary and not the purpose. And I think that for me, particularly, I think growing up, I was very fortunate to have educators or teachers, my mother included, who would always twist it into a story. And I think that for me, I understood stories. I understood science through stories, and pathology, as I'm sure all of your listeners and readers for The Pathologist knows, is the study of disease. It's cardinal. It's the backbone of a hospital. And it's really never included in early education because I think that you can't really make a very direct connection, even though children will have interacted with the healthcare system in some way, right? Whether it be well visits or sick visits, etc. So ultimately, I think science becomes powerful when it feels connected to life. And I think that the visual of Mia shrinking and going into the blood, talking about what's happening to Leo and bringing it back to Leo is a story arc, which I think is cool. And no specific gaps, but I think that, even though this isn't a specific gap, we're hopeful that there's a value proposition to this type of storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's so important too to be for children to be aware of pathology, right? I mean, my daughter now says she wants to be a blood pathologist, is what she calls it, like Kamran, because she knows him, right? And she's
Let's
seen
go.
him. She understands what he does. And so, and a lot of other pathologists and laboratory professionals, and just throwing that out in people's minds, like, hey, this is a potential avenue just to be aware of, not necessarily to then explore it in a professional way. But I think that that's really impactful, really powerful from a young age.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a little personal win for Kamran there.
Mm-hmm.
100%. 100%.
Amazing. So, do either of you have any hopes for Mia's future? Should we expect to see any more books lining the shelves, Lotte?
Absolutely. We've set it up as a series. It's currently a series of one. But yeah, we absolutely love to write more books. We've been brainstorming a little bit already on the next book, and really can't wait to see where Mia and Micah go on their next adventures and what other kids they like to help. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to explore in the laboratory, so there's plenty of things for them to discover and do.
That's very exciting. I can't wait to see it. And finally, is there anything either of you would like to tell our readers, either about yourselves or the field or what we can see next? Lotte, can we start with you?
Yeah, I really just want to thank people for everybody who's already purchased the book or has already donated to our GoFundMe page. It's been just an amazing couple of weeks, and Kamran and I keep texting each other the number of books that we get to donate, and we're starting to work out on where to start first. And it's just been an incredible journey. I mean, we could not have done any of it without any of those people. So I'm just incredibly grateful.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that, we're so honored that people are finding an understanding of science, maybe an exploration of STEM careers, that we're hopefully making an impact on girls in STEM, about curiosity, and obviously about pathology as well. So, even if it inspires one child to be less afraid of an illness or a visit to the hospital, or, one family who might be waiting in a leukemia clinic, waiting room, and maybe help them become more informed, or, one future scientist to pick up a microscope or a digital microscope of the future, then I think that this book has done its job. We're so grateful to everyone who's purchased it or donated it, and we love being part of that journey with them.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much. It's been fantastic, and I can't wait for future versions to come out.
Thank you.